So welcome everybody to this 30-minute Meridian West webinar. Delighted to be joining you today. I'm Alistair Beddoe. I'm the Managing Director here at Meridian West. Unless you've been in a cave for the last 18 months or so, you'll be aware that AI is the kind of topic of the moment. And I think a lot of the research that we've been doing, particularly our most recent tracker with CMOs and strategy leads at professional firms, suggests that AI is a big area of focus at the moment. So just to give you an idea, when we interviewed people as part of the latest Managing Partners Forum tracker in May this year, 76% of those said that AI was going to be a critical part of their firm's growth strategy. 94% expected it would result in increased productivity. But interestingly, when asked to rate how they thought their firm was currently doing around approaching AI, most people put themselves somewhere in the middle, in terms of 0 being way behind the market, 10 being a market leader. The average we saw there was around 5.5. So I think lots of people interested in the topic. And I think one of the things that's been missing from a lot of the conversation is really around the practical use cases to which tools and AI technologies can be deployed. So that's really what we wanted to address on this session today. We wanted to really bring to you some exciting, innovative things that we've been working on, particularly as they apply to the field of qualitative research, which historically has been an area that has been driven by a lot of manual processes and has been not served very well by technology. So we've been working on MeridianAI. I'm going to invite colleagues Ben and Illich shortly to give you a sense of what that looks like. But before we get on to demoing that, maybe Ben, just to set the scene for us a little bit. Qualitative research has been a big part of what we've been doing at Meridian West for over 20 years now. A big part of our projects taking, interview data, reports, and trying to extract insights from those. Just give us a sense of, historically how that process would have been done, and perhaps a little sense of how the technology is really seeking to address some of the legacy ways of doing that.
Yeah, I think you put your finger on it. I think what we found is that, yes, we were doing lots and lots of in-depth interviews for thought leadership, market strategy, client feedback projects. But really, it was quite a manual process. Whereas we've been using lots of technology, dashboarding technology, to kind of really speed up the process in quant data, qual was quite a sort of artisanal kind of activity. So I think that was it. Well, first of all, we're finding, to do any kind of, for each project, we'd have to do, for each interview, we'd do a transcript. We would then do an executive summary of that interview. That would take at least a couple of hours. And then as soon as you started getting any sort of scale in the number of interviews, 10 or 20, you're really talking about days, if not weeks, to get that completed. And it was quite easy to kind of get lost in the data. There's such a volume. So that was the kind of the pain point, if you like.
Yeah. And I think from experience, the last 2 decades or so, it's, as you say, it is has been very time consuming.
Yeah.
But I think the other piece is just around, we all have kind of human biases, if you like.
Yeah.
We latch on to certain things, we look for certain things that maybe don't give us a completely true read on what's there in the data, or we miss things. And I think increasingly the ability to draw in multiple data sources is very much where I think a lot of firms, particularly in the marketing and business development functions, are really trying to focus, so that they can get that complete view of what's going on, and to do that quickly. So I think that brings us very nicely onto the journey that we've been on in terms of developing Meridian AI. I think really exciting. It's something that we've been putting to good use directly with our clients, and some of our clients have been using it directly themselves within their own firms. So maybe the best way of helping our audience kind of understand what it does, what it looks like, is to walk us through, maybe give a little bit of a demo of some of the key features. And I think, maybe walking us through what a typical use case for that might be.
Yeah, so the genesis of this was we kind of started working with Rubik Lab, headed up by Illich, kind of a year and a half ago, and we started using our on a kind of existing projects when the Meridian West team were doing it. But then we kind of transitioned quite quickly to then offering it up to clients. So we worked with Mills and Reeve, for example, who just completed 60 in-depth interviews, slightly daunted by the scope of, the idea of analyzing all those interviews, the like complicated themes they were covering. So that was the kind of the genesis of it. And I don't know, Ilif, if you want to give some of the context as well.
Yes, sure. So, well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to explain what we've been doing and for inviting everyone to this webinar. Yeah, so the whole idea was to remove some of those transactional steps that are part historically of the qualitative process. And of course, we're thinking of cost and speed. But then there is also like another dimension that applies when using this tool is the impact that this has on the way that you work and on the way that you structure your thinking, but also even in your workflow. So, if we think in terms of adoption of technology, like the speed and cost is always like the starting point in the journey, if you want. But where we really see the value is when it starts impacting your practice and your approach to data and insight. And we are going to describe this when showing the demo. But I think this is a really an important element of the conversation because most of the time when I look around at the AI landscape, there is a lot of like quick win type of conversation, but there is much more to it.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
let's imagine then that let's say I'm a head of client experience at a firm. Been doing lots of interviews, going out speaking to clients, maybe recording those, writing notes. I've got all of this stuff. I need to kind of make sense of it. Let's have a look at how Meridian AI can help us do that.
Fine. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so this is a demo that we set up. We put some of our own interviews in it. So it's really easy to use, essentially. So this is kind of home page. So what you'd first of all do, if let's say Alistair, you've done an interview. It's an hour and a half long. You've done it on Teams, or you may have recorded it just through audio. So what you do first of all is just come in here, and you add new data source. So essentially, all you need to do is you just take it off the folder and drag it in here. And what you also do is just name that document. And you can also put some kind of metadata in. So you can just sort of tag it and say, look, this is in this sector, or I was speaking to a CFO. So super easy to do. But at the moment, the demo does audio files and video files. Very shortly, actually, later on this month, it will also be able to handle other documents, so kind of Word documents, PDFs, which will be really transformational. So you can then do interview notes, or pretty much any other type of report can be uploaded as well. So you've got a kind of one view of the client. So then what happens is you just wait 10 minutes, you get an email, and then you can just log in and you see something like this. So it's created a kind of full transcript of that interview. As you can see, it's extremely accurate. It's even dealt with kind of proper names. Just scroll through, you can't, it's unbelievably accurate. So it's higher quality than what you get with a Teams transcript, for example. Another really nice piece of functionality is you can click on a part of the transcript, and you can go and watch the video back. So you can go back and kind of say, oh, I'm particularly interested in what they said there. I'd just like to sort of watch that again. You can also change the update the text, change the names. So if it starts with speaker 1, speaker 2, just change that. Oh, it's Ben Kent. That's David Keckwick. The other nice feature here is the speaker analysis. So what it does is it just sort of summarizes the role of the individual speakers within that interview, which is obviously helpful in an interview, but it's like super helpful if you're using this for a workshop or a focus group, and we've used it with good effect in kind of client roundtables, for example. So that's really helpful. What is the kind of magic, if you like, is the summary. So traditionally, we used to kind of manually write up executive summaries of each interview. Incredibly hard to do, actually, because interviews meandered around, quite dense. This does it at a click of a button, and not only is it fast, but it's in fact it's incredibly good as well. And you can give it the structure. So if you have a certain structure of how you do your executive summaries, it can follow that. And it's quite really interesting. It's kind of, in many ways, it's kind of doing this yourself. You kind of always have to kind of control your own bias. You tend to latch on to things that are of interest to you, or latch on to things, a bit negative. Whereas AI is a bit like a kind of very sensible friend. It gives a much more objective view, which gives you kind of confidence in what it's saying. Clearly,
And
you can go. Sorry,
I was just going to say, I think that's a really interesting point, actually, because
Yeah.
when I think about a lot of the, when I'm doing interviews, as you say, you're either then having to rely on what you kind of remember, so what stays in your head when you're producing those instant summary notes, or you're having to go back through everything, maybe re-listen to things, or as you say, wait for that transcript. Whereas this gives you something which is almost pretty much instantaneous. And I think that's fantastic. But I think the other important thing is actually when we're working with firms where often partners are doing interviews, or people who are, maybe don't have the then time to go away and write up full notes straight away, it still gives you the ability, particularly if those are recorded, to produce those summaries pretty quickly. And then spot those follow-up opportunities. What are the things that we said we would do by way of actions, conclusions, next steps that otherwise might just get missed?
I couldn't agree more. And I think what it also does, it takes some sort of meandering conversations and restructures them. So we work with some very big global professional services firms. They're doing 100, 200 interviews a year, done by a kind of, partners, BD people. And the quality of the notes we get, to be honest, are quite variable. And it's very hard then to do analysis. This cuts through that issue. It kind of creates a high quality output at scale.
I think one of the other issues is really then about how you say, how do we take not just a single interview, but multiple interviews. You talked about an example there of clients doing 50, 100, 200 interviews. So how does the tool deal with that, and what kind of insight can it tell us from that?
So this is what we do. So what you then do is when you've got multiple interviews, is you just click on this analysis tab, and what that's done is it summarizes all the interviews. So I just go back down here, filter it to all sources. So what this is now doing is summarizing all the interviews. And so this is just based on 8 interviews, but with Mills and Reeve it was 60. We're working with one of the big 4 firms. That's even more than that. It's like 80 interviews. So it gives you that kind of first cut of this is what this kind of data is saying. So what we've done is we try to structure this dashboard to be as similar as possible to our kind of report back kind of presentation. So you've got an executive summary, and then you dive into particular themes. And as you can see from this, the quality of the summary is actually incredibly good. It's really, because I did these interviews, I know they're kind of pretty much spot on in terms of the topics they've addressed. And kind of what's more, you can also kind of dive into it. So you can, it's identified that this kind of need for pragmatic, commercially aware legal counsel is particularly important. So you can just dive into that, and it pulls up the quotes relating to that. And as you can see, it's pulled out the kind of right quotes. So what I'm trying to do is kind of replicate the process we go through when we're doing analysis, which is what's the key findings, what's the evidence we have to support that finding to give it flavor.
I think that's a really interesting point as well, because, again, just speaking from experience, I remember certainly, 10, 15 years ago, you'd have printouts of lots of transcripts, there'd be highlights, all over different pages, and then you'd think, oh, I know somebody said something really interesting about this point, but I just can't find where it is, or I've got to go back through. And it sounds like from what you're saying that takes away that need to keep in your mind who said what. It gives you the evidence behind the conclusions it's drawing.
Yeah, super easy to do. And what it does, to be honest, so with Mills and me, for example, they had to set aside 3 weeks solid analysis to analyze those 60 interviews. So that's fairly typical. And we got that down to essentially a few days. And we found, because we're using it on pretty much all our qual projects within Meridian West as well, massive time saving. And what that enables you to do, you don't kind of get bogged down in finding quotes and doing that first cut. What it frees you up to do is to really think about the implications and the kind of so what, because you've got the kind of mental energy to do that and the time to do that.
And I think one of the things that I know people will have, seen all the stories about AI essentially hallucinating, making things up, using tools like ChatGPT, and you ask questions and it, creates fake legal cases or other things that have got people into trouble. Maybe Illich, this is something you can come in on as well as Ben, but how do we deal with the trust in what's coming through by way of the conclusions that it's drawing, that addressing that issue of hallucinations or having confidence in the data?
Yeah, but that's a key topic, and we've really. So you've got different elements to this question. The first one is we describe the tool as an AI tool, and yes, there is like an AI component to the tool, but you can think of the AI element as a wrapper, if you want, that can go and like bring all of the information together in a clear and understandable way. But the AI doesn't do the heavy lifting in our tool. So in the background, we have proper statistical models, natural language processing, some more like traditional type of tools that we use when dealing with large, complex data set. And I know it sounds a bit like not so flashy and exciting, but actually all the pre-processing and all the things that happen behind the scene, all the preparation of the data, the tagging, the noise removal, etc., allows for the AI wrapper, if you want, to then be equipped and be able to make sense of the data. And this allows a couple of really key benefits. One, very few people know this, but large language models actually are terrible at counting. They're like level of maybe 12-year-old in maths, and you don't want to run your analysis with like a 12-year-old doing your statistics, which is why you need to prepare with like proper solid statistical models in the background. And one point that we touched upon earlier is this idea of with tools, like with generic tools, are a bit of a black box in a way that they can come up with an answer that look very convincing, but you don't really know if you can trust it, and you don't understand the reasoning steps behind the model, and also you don't control the data with which the model has been trained upon or has access to. And here we really wanted to have a completely different approach. Ben soon will present. We have an element where we've kept like the practicality of this chat interface, because it's just great to be able to ask questions to your data set. But our tool will tell you if it doesn't know something because it's not present in the data. And like some of the frontier models don't know how to tell you, I don't know. And we thought in terms of honesty. I mean, this was like really important and a big milestone to achieve this. And then the ability, just like in academic work, to be able to trace the data back to the quotation. So if you come up with a particular statement, you need to be able to back it up with some citations and link to the data.
Yeah. So here's the you can see here, you can find the quotes that support the point, and those quotes are accurate, because we follow them back to the transcript, and they are spot on.
And maybe Illich mentioned that idea of also being able to interrogate the data. I think
Yes.
that's a really interesting thing. I think we're becoming more familiar with some of those interfaces, with things like ChatGPT. But just explain to us, or maybe show us, Ben, how that works in this context. So, if I've got a question about all the different interviews, and maybe it hasn't, there's not something that's been surfaced in the summaries, but I want to kind of explore if there's something in there. Is that possible?
Yeah, so there's two ways of doing that. First of all, you can identify what you see here, the sort of themes. So when you're setting up the project, what you do is you can say, AI, I'm particularly interested in these themes. So when we did it with Mills and Reeve, we sat down with them and said, look, what's the main thrust of what you want to get out of this? So we were able to put those themes in, and then you can say, well, I'm particularly interested in pricing transparency. You click here, and it pulls out everything that was said around that. And as you can see here, pricing transparency is a fairly nuanced area, but it's pulled out a very nice summary here of what was being said. So that's the first way. The second way is you can have a sort of direct, what we call talk to your data, which is similar to what you get in ChatGPT, but just looking at our data set. So you can then say things like, what are people saying about pricing?
Yeah, and the more accurate the question, or the more detailed the question, the more detailed the answer as well.
Yeah. So you can see here, it's pulled out some sort of quotes around pricing structures. You can also, and what it's also done is pulled out some quotes that relate to that sort of topic. Here, you see these are some previous chats I put in. So, one of the themes we addressed was kind of the teams and the team structure and how they're operating. I asked them for their strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, that's really helpful. So this is kind of we use it a lot when we're putting together kind of presentation packs, because you nearly always say, okay, you get your overall summary. These are the main themes, and then you say, what did they say about that particular topic? I really need to build it out. I need to find some quotes, and this tool is extremely helpful for that.
And I think the other thing that's really important there, I think, is also that this is giving you the opportunity to validate, reinterpret, put your own spin on it. I think it's about not blindly following what the technology is saying to you, but using that very much as the guidance, speeding up the processes that you've talked about, honing in on the things that are important, but not blindly following that. You can trace back to particular things that people have said, the evidence for the points that it's making.
Totally agree. And actually, I think my experience of using quite a few projects now is you get to a better result. So I was just talking this morning with the team, we're doing some analysis. So we were doing a whole series of in-depth interviews actually for a charity. And what it enabled us to do is we could plug in the transcripts just from the first few interviews and get a very good kind of first, what's going on, what are the general themes which are coming on really early on in the process. What that meant is when in the subsequent interviews, we could really dive into the things which we still had uncertainties around. So we could be much more iterative rather than sort of going away and only doing the analysis at the end. Also, I think what I found is we've got, by doing the grunt work, essentially, we've got much more time to think about and debate and hone the recommendations and what does this mean. So yeah, I think you get a better response, and you can, because to some extent MeridianAI is kind of objective, it gives you confidence in what it's saying, and then you can build on top of that.
And I know one of the things, and maybe people on this call will have encountered it, maybe looking at some of the tools out there themselves, coming up against, maybe some pushback internally around things like data security. If we're going to put things like interviews with clients into tools, can we be confident on, they are secure, we're following the right protocols, policies around that. It sounded like from what you and Ilyich were saying before that, this is a self-contained system, but is there anything you'd kind of say around just the data security aspect of this? Because it's a big one that I know many firms are grappling with.
Yeah, that's right. So we go to be able to work with the type of organizations that we work with, we need to go really the extra mile in terms of technical setup, in terms also of how we communicate and how we engage with our clients, like repeating best practice, etc. But also like these are all sort of protocols that happen in the background, like we do, for example, some constant ethical hacking of our system to try to look for any vulnerability within the infrastructure, and we have all standard type of accreditations to be able to work, with big law firms, with big consultancies, and outside of our partnership with Meridian West, we also work in the healthcare sector, for example. So in terms of sensitive data, that's a big one as well. And and we got all supporting documentations. We are happy to interact with your IT and security team as well.
Right. And maybe Ben, we've talked a lot about obviously taking things like client interviews as a good way of utilizing the tool, but that isn't the only way that we've been deploying it. There's plenty of other use cases. Perhaps you could just say a little bit around some of the other ways that it could be used, just to give people a little flavor of that as well.
Yeah. So we keep finding new user cases for it. So basically it deals with any kind of conversation. So, so on the client insight side, one of the things we're doing is, using recordings of kind of informal conversations, maybe secondees coming back and adding that to the mix. So that's one. We've also used it for employee kind of workshops and in-depth interviews. Works super well for that. We've used it for kind of roundtables and conferences. So some of you may have been at the PSMG conference, but what we did is we recorded each of the plenary sessions and then gave access to the audience after the conference so they could go back, see a summary of each presentation and ask natural questions. So, we're also speaking to some of the big management consultancy firms, Bain and others, so they can use it for the consultancy side of their sector, because they do a lot of consultancy as part of their kind of professional undertaking. So yeah, I think so that's just with the existing kind of functionality. What we're going to be achieving in the data on this month is pulling in other external data sources, which I think is like super exciting. So what you could do is, let's say you've got a key account, it's Tesco's, you could analyze the interviews you've done with the CFO and the general counsel, but you can also pull in external data sources on their annual accounts, analyst reports, what people are saying about Tesco's in social media, and to kind of create that nirvana of a kind of 360-degree view of the client. And that I think will be a fantastic tool to put in the hands of the partners to spot those opportunities for kind of deepening the relationship with them and being kind of that's because they understand that client so well, become their trusted advisor. So I think it's a data-driven trusted advisor, if you like.
Fantastic. So we've hopefully whetted people's appetite today. If you're interested and excited by what we've been talking about, and I hope you are, there are opportunities to either have a longer demo session so we can walk you through in a bit more detail the features and the functionality that we've been talking about, but also an opportunity to trial it yourselves for a couple of weeks. So don't just take our word about how amazing and revolutionary it is. We want you to see that in practice, either with some of your own data, or there are plenty of ways that you can trial the tool without actually having to give confidential client or other information into it. So we'd love to get as many of you experimenting with that as possible, and we'll be in touch about that. And if you're interested, please do let us know. But we've just ticked over to hour. So with that in mind, I want to say thanks to Ben, thanks to Illich for taking us through some really exciting things there. And I hope you can join us for a following webinar coming up very soon. Thanks.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.